a great pleasure to welcome everyone here to Pass Paley Showroom in Melbourne, and what a fantastic venue. This is the first time we've been able to do one of our Leaders Lecture series in a setting like this, and what a wonderful bunch of fantastic jewellery on display. So thank you very much to the team at Pass Paley for putting this on with us here tonight. A couple of logistics before we get started. The first is you'll notice that in keeping with the sophisticated setting, we've only been serving white wine and verve. So for the beer drinkers in the room, apologies, but I hope you're enjoying the fantastic beverages put on display. The second thing is there's a nice crystal bowl floating around. I think it's right in the centerpiece there. If you haven't put your business card, or even if you have, pop another one in, because there are some fantastic prizes at the end of tonight's presentation from our sponsors in Randstad and SAS, as well as Pass Paley have put a set of 7mm Keshi pearls studs up for grabs tonight. So make sure you, if you haven't put your business card in there, put one in throughout the course of this evening. If you do need to use the restrooms, because we're part of the hotel, it's just out the front and around the corner. So just making that available to you now. There's also AB+F magazines on top of the displays, and please make sure you take one of those home with you tonight to find a little bit about what's happening outside in the big bad world of banking and finance. So 2012 is going to be a big year for our Leaders Lectures series. We're really delighted to be kicking it off tonight with Lisa Gray. We now do over 60 events across 4 countries, and we're really excited to be able to work with the region's banking, finance, industry, and professionals. We do one of these at least once a month, and as I mentioned, we do them in Singapore, Hong Kong, Auckland, Melbourne, Brisbane, Adelaide, and Sydney. So make sure you check out our website, financialpublications.com.au, for when the next one is, and hopefully we'll see you along. Now, there is a lot of familiar faces in the room tonight. You'll know that these Leaders Lectures we run in quite an intimate environment. So, you know, as I say, there's a few seats out the front, but generally speaking, we want to have a bit of dialogue. Lisa's been kind enough to open up the floor for some questions. So those of you who've been to some of these before know that they can we can get some good dialogue going with the crowd. So make sure you put your hand up. Andrew, my colleague, will be around with a microphone later on, and we'll get that going. So tonight's event really, again, couldn't have been possible without the input and continued support of 2 of our long-time and major partners. You'll notice that the series is called the Randstad Leaders Lectures. Randstad has very kindly, again in 2012, supported this series right throughout the region, and we're delighted to have their continued support. Tonight is specifically sponsored by SAS Australia. And again, very, very much delighted to have them involved in tonight and right throughout our entire calendar. So without any further delay, I'd like to invite Jason Cartwright, who is the Group Director of Randstad, to give you an opening welcome. Jason.
Thanks, Tyler. Hello, good evening. I do need to start with a confession. 22 years I reckon I've been doing this. I've never presented in a jewellery shop. I tend to avoid them. Yeah, I never come with my wallet or my wife. So, a quick word from your sponsors, us, and then Paul will introduce our speaker and then on to the main act. So, Randstad have been a proud sponsor of the Leaders Lecture series through AB+F for many years now. And we are a relatively new name to the Australian market, 3 years old now, and but we've been operating globally for over 50 years. In this country, we were previously operating under 27 different company names which included Link Recruitment, Tanner Menzies, Select, and many others. Today, Randstad specialises in solutions in the field of recruitment and human resources services. We are one of the leading HR service providers in the world. We operate out of 40 countries globally, and we've got 27,000 of our own employees, and each day we send out over 750,000 temp and contract workers into assignments every day. So we call that shaping the world of work, just like it says on the tin there. In Australia, in this country, we're the market leader in banking and financial services recruitment. Tough gig at the moment, as you can imagine. We operate one of the largest teams in banking and financial services recruitment in Australia, and even in these challenging times, we've maintained our footprint and will be holding the investment. So always therefore pleased to partner with AB+F and offer the opportunity for banking financial service leaders to network and share industry information. It's a sector that's facing critical challenges at the moment, brought about by increasing funding costs, slow loan growth and general degraded public image of the sector right from the aftermath of the GFC to the current time. And over the past month we have witnessed large-scale redundancies and outsourcing plans from all major players in an effort to reduce their cost base under constant pressure on margins across the country. So the sector is going through considerable adjustment at the moment and does need to find innovative solutions, hence tonight's topic of being different. It is an area that will require new skills and new processes, and never before has differentiation or being different played such a key or pivotal role. One thing that comes to light with us is our Randstad World of Work report. Lots of copies here tonight around the $88,000 necklaces that you guys are hiding. We recently surveyed 4,000 people in the industry sector, and this year's report highlights a couple of the main human capital issues facing the banking financial services industry sector over the next 12 months. And they are in order: retaining top performers, 19% of respondents said that was their most critical objective. Second was attracting new talent, so yep, even in this market attracting new talent was critical. Thirdly was increasing workforce performance and productivity. So a lot going on. Not surprisingly, the attractiveness of the sector has, as a destination for new workers, has plummeted. That's going to present all of us with challenges over the next few years. And so tonight we're going to be talking about differentiation and why being different is good for your customers and your people, and why it makes good sense for your business. At Randstad we call it specialisation, and you know, NAB is also a partner client of ours, and they also run a number of programs which I won't steal Lisa's thunder, but one of them from a recruitment and talent point of view for women in management is called Speak Up, Step Up for women in middle management positions, so they can move into more senior management positions. That's made a huge impact in the talent or job seeker candidate applicant market, and NAB has really stepped forward to differentiate itself in this space. So I've got a couple of other examples that my corporate comms people gave me, but I'm just going to leave with a story, really, chatting to Lisa about being different and customer service. And it was a Friday night in Sydney Airport with the recent thunderstorms, and we've all been there, lots of people in the room nodding, and lightning strikes, nothing was going anywhere. Airport closed, planes grounded. Huge queue behind the Qantas desk, get me home, we've all been there, we know what that's like. Lots of people thumping the counter, lots of people yelling. One single Qantas employee, female, on the counter, managing this very diligently, very professionally, dealing with each applicant as they came up to the counter. One guy there, quite short, red face, and I actually don't know who he is, but he actually rolled up to the counter, slapped the Qantas Chairman's Lounge President's Club thing, you know, on the desk, started thumping the desk, you've got to get me home, you've got to get me home. She responds professionally and politely, nothing happens. He keeps thumping the desk, and she remains professional. Eventually she just says to him, mate, look out the window. Nothing is going anywhere. There's a hailstorm and there's lightning. There is nothing you can say to me that's going to get you home. He then says, and I am not making this up, leans forward, do you know who I am? And she, without the bat of an eyelid, grabs the podium microphone. Doo-doo. Attention please, customers. We have a gentleman at the counter that has forgotten who he is. If anyone in the Qantas lounge recognises this gentleman, would they please approach the podium? He then slinks off. A lot of people in the lounge nominated her for Employee of the Month, which she won. So, story about being different. So I hope you enjoy Lisa's presentation tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. Now, thank you very much, Jason. And I think Sydney's getting bombarded again tonight. So hopefully no one's missed out on tonight trying to get back for that. It gives me great pleasure to welcome our next speaker, the gentleman who's going to introduce Lisa. SAS, major supporters of AB+F, as I said, right throughout the calendar year. Without any further delay, I'd like to welcome Paul Franks, who's the General Manager of Financial Services for SAS. Paul.
Thanks, Tom. Regrettably, Jason, I can't tell one of those stories, but I know how the guy feels, and yes, I know who I am. Perhaps just a bit of context. Obviously, to continue the theme from tonight, I often have not had the chance to speak of the connection between Randstad and SAS, but I'm going to draw one if I can. SAS as an organisation is recognised globally as a great place to work, and probably the reason for that is manifold, but probably some of the main things are just the types of things you've got to talk about tonight, Lisa. People being empowered, people being given the opportunity to do things differently, and also perhaps not only what they do in their work life, but also what they do in their community. We're very proud to be in the top 10 in many nations where we are, and certainly in Australia in the top 50. We hope to make that a much more significant one as we go forward. In terms of SAS and the topic of customers, we've been working on the very issue of how do you engage and win customers much more effectively, and more importantly, retain them. But the one thing we often speak about when we talk of customers is how do you influence their behaviour? What makes them stay with you? Do you have a relationship that is intimate? More importantly, is it connected? And is it one that's enduring? I mentioned to Lisa, I'm a person who likes the little details, whilst I like the big picture too. I opened my NAB statement the other day, so I've been an NAB customer for 25 years, and I was actually thanked for being a customer. It's important in this day and age that you thank people for being with you for such a long time. If that's a testament to the sort of difference you want to make, I think it's really good. I've had the pleasure of walking into your new branch at Docklands, which I think is absolutely fantastic. I know we've had people talking about divorces. I prefer to talk about it as a new relationship. So I think it's how you start and how you finish is really important. For me, I get the pleasure of hearing about all sorts of journeys people go on as customers. But I remember you many years ago. I've been a BRW reader for a long, long time, and I saw perhaps a younger person leading Plum, which is good. I say that in a nice way. Leading Plum, and when it wasn't fashionable to be doing that sort of thing. So I saw you as a pioneer then. I've seen you come through the National Australia Bank ranks, and I think absolutely been a great spokesman, not only for women in business, but more importantly, someone who's actually willing to step up and make a change, but not only talk the right way, but deliver it. So I think for me, certainly from NAB, I had the pleasure of talking to your CEO a couple of weeks ago, and I'm absolutely sure he wants to be different. So may you carry that flag for him as well. I think on that basis, we've heard the topic tonight is what makes it different to be with customers. How do you do that not only for them, but for the people, and more importantly, how do you make it count? I'd like to come to the stage and share your vision, and particularly your experience in how you do that. Welcome, Lisa, to the stage.
Thank you, Paul, Jason, and everyone. I'd like you to suspend where you are today and go back a few years. Go back end of 08, early 09 to the beginning, to the early days of the GFC, and around about the time that I actually moved into this role as well. And I can recall we're having one of our monthly business review meetings, and we're going through the performance of the business. And we got to the credit card business. So I said to and we noticed that revenue was going down. So I said to the person who was running that business at the time, gee, what's happening here? And he sort of rolled his eyes back and said, oh, people are paying off their credit cards faster. It's just no good. And I said, well, we've got a global financial crisis. People are concerned, they're being prudent, they're managing their money better. What's the problem? And he said, well, we're making less money. And it was at that point in time that I had what I call a BFO, a blinding flash of the obvious. And it became very obvious to me that there was fundamentally something unsustainable about our industry. When we bemoaned customers for actually managing their money better because we made less money from that. And the economics of our industry actually encouraged us to turn a blind eye when customers weren't managing the money as best as they actually could. So that was 3 years ago, and that was a major turning point for us, and really the start of a journey that we've been on that is fundamental to what we believe in and how we're running our business and our strategy commercially. So we started off on a journey which really started to have very different momentum. We started to have very different types of conversations and dialogue. It was one based on a commitment to listening in a very different way, and fundamentally about trying to lead differently around disruption. So I want to give you a sense of that journey and where that's actually taken us. So we start off with the different momentum that we've had over the last few years, which continues to build. That journey started about 3 years ago, in the middle of the GFC, and we noticed clearly that there was a really fundamentally poor relationship between banks and finance companies over the world and their customers and the broader community. And our sense of that was really that the whole system had got out of balance. And one of the key drivers around the GFC had been an expectation that there should have been a fair exchange of value, but there wasn't. That the sharing of value had got out of whack. Fewer and fewer were sharing the greatest portion of value, and ultimately the system, collapsed because there wasn't that fair exchange of value. And that financial institutions had lost sight of the fact that they lived in a community, not just in an economy. So that anger came from a real imbalance in terms of exchange of value. And if you think about where we are right now in terms of the dialogue that goes on and the emotion that goes on just in terms of simple interest rate changes in our country today, part of that is fuelled by the fact that there is a fair exchange of value. If you think when there's generally a fair exchange of value, that generally is not a topic that people spend more and more time on. So we'll come back to that. So the journey started where we noticed and really wanted to tap into a sentiment that we think and has proven to be something that was fundamentally changing where things are going, and the demands from community and customers as well. So since that time, our view is that NAB has done more for competition in this country than any other Australian bank. We've abolished some of the most disliked fees, changed and made our credit card payments much fairer, introduced a range of new services, and have continued, not only for the last 32 months, but made a commitment for the rest of this year to have the lowest standard variable rate for home loans. Just some of the things that we started to do on that journey. We also, though, knew that as we started that journey, there'd be a lot of cynicism. So we needed to make sure that what we were doing was actually building a rolling thunder and doing many, many things, not just one thing that people would have interpreted as a tactic or a gimmick or just a campaign. This was a strategy and a philosophy that we were building upon. We also knew with our people who jump the counter whenever they need to for a customer, that they too would be cynical. And in the very early days they were. I can recall the middle of 2009 when we abolished overdrawn account fees, they were cynical. Why? They were cynical because they didn't trust that management wouldn't go and renege on that, go and do something else, go and create a fee somewhere else. So we're very conscious of that. And that was one of the reasons in the very early days we put out ads with letters signed, from Cameron and I saying, we will not do that. Because we wanted to be so stark about that, that there was no return. So that journey's continued. Now, what sort of different momentum has that achieved? Well, if we look, what we think we've shown is that if you do the right thing by your customer and your people, commercial returns will come from that. We've had significant uplifts in market share in home lending, from about 13% to about 14.5%. Customer growth over the last few years of about 8% per annum, which places us very well for where we are in a subdued environment. Significant growth in just everyday banking, accounts and relationships with us. Typically they've grown by about 50% every year for the last 2 to 3 years and continue to do that. The highest level of customer satisfaction we've had in 15 years, which is the longest that Roy Morgan has actually been recording it. So significant uplift. And finally, the thing that I'm probably, most proud of, the fact that our people engagement is now above the global finance industry standards and benchmarks, the index. But probably what I've been most personally pleased about is that if you look at our financial returns for last year, we've shown that you can do the right thing by your people and your customer and deliver better outcomes for shareholders. In fact, our cash earnings at the end of last financial year were higher than when we started on this strategy of fair value. So what are the other things that we've been doing differently? I talked about a different type of conversation. So having a very, very different dialogue has been fundamental to that. And something that's been very public about the dialogue we've been having has clearly been about some of our marketing campaigns. And if you go back this time last year, we did break up with the other banks. And I think we look all right. Still looking happy, still happy with ourselves, and making lots of friends, actually. We've just recently launched a new campaign, which is all about putting a spotlight, one, on the track record we have done, because it's about actions, and Australians look for actions, and they speak much louder than words. But it's also putting a spotlight and a challenge on our major competitors to say, stop making excuses. By all means, join us on this journey. Just stop making excuses, because people can see those. But you cannot run campaigns like Break Up, or the one themed around excuses that we're running right now, if you don't have a core underlying philosophy and strategy. So think of those campaigns as purely a raw articulation of what we have been doing over the last few years and the sorts of things we'll continue to do into the future. The other conversations, though, we've been having is with our people. I talked a bit about the potential for cynicism. It's always been about trying to build a movement with our people, something that was self-compelling for them, and also something self-propelling so they continue to drive those things. So we have many, many different types of very open dialogue with our people, talking to them, for example, recently about how do cost of funds work? What goes into that? How do we make the sort of choices we need to that translate into interest rate changes? Having webinars around that. We do a lot of blogging and use internal Twitter-type social media, which is called Yammer. Well, we have hundreds of different topics that our people talk to us about, and there's a lot of dialogue around that. All uncensored, all just open, honest conversation where they start to propel where things are actually going. And if you think about the conversations with our customers, our group CEO is regularly now talking on talkback radio. So really signalling a very different way of doing things. So different conversation. The second thing's been around a commitment to listening in a very different way. If you do not listen, then you're destined to destroying your company or your industry. And so we're committed to listening to what Australians and our customers are actually saying. So think of companies such as Kodak, Borders, even Blockbuster Videos, who hung on to an old business model, didn't listen, thought that their incumbency would be sufficient, and are now fallen by the wayside. We know that technology and social media is playing a huge role in the conversation that's occurring. If I go back to 2009, we put in place something called Bank Chat. We actually did that, so it was an online chat session in the public forum. We did that anonymously initially because we weren't sure if people knew it was a bank having that conversation, because we'd go back to early mid-2009, if they would be honest in what they would actually say, and if they would commit to a constructive dialogue. Partway through that, so we had a fantastic discussion. Partway through that, we said it was NAB having this conversation, and the nature of the honest dialogue continued through. And some of the things that we got from that we implemented going forward. So we spent a lot of time around social media and listen very strongly. I think about the recent 13 Switch helpline that we've just launched to help Australians switch their banking. We know from research that they're wanting to do that. We've listened to them doing that, and that is a first in Australia where it's dedicated to helping them actually switch. We now have on our internet site, our public website, ability for anyone to rate our credit cards. And then we take that ratings and then we look at how do we actually improve our credit cards as well. We have about 27,000 followers on Twitter, Facebook, Google+, who again continue to input to what we are doing. And they are fundamentally having an impact on how we're listening and then how we're changing our business. So a commitment to listening differently. The third element is really about embracing different disruption. Now, if you're waiting for disruption, or if, most of us will be pretty sure disruption is coming to our industry and our country. Well, clearly it is already here. Consumers, community groups are constantly having a dialogue and doing things in very, very different ways. Technology is playing a major, major role. These days, Australians and anyone using technology needs technology and intermediaries such as banks and institutions less and less. We think one of the major areas of growth, and the one probably having some of the greatest impact, is mobile. Already this year, about 85% of handsets will be enabled with smartphone capacity. We installed internet banking capability onto mobile devices about a year ago. About a third of our logons now are via a mobile device, just in about a year's time. So it's starting to have a very, very different impact. We also know that people are talking to each other using technology. So do they trust? There's been polls on this, I think, recently. Do they trust, who do they trust? I think they do trust the Treasurer. And Glenn Stevens, which is a good thing. He's making very sensible comments of recent times. And then they trust their circles of trust and community. Their social networks, who they're talking to, they go there for product advice, they go there to look at very, very different things. So you cannot ignore, and we see that as very much a key part, not only of listening, but being able to leverage from a disruptive perspective. So technology is having a major disruptive factor, and it's important for us as an incumbent to embrace that and be part of that and not hope it will go away. So some of the things that we're starting to see, I've touched briefly on mobile. We're also seeing different things going on overseas, particularly with some mainstream banks. Because if I look at what we're doing with our retail network, and Paul, you mentioned our store down in Docklands, our retail team are not thinking about comparing themselves to other banks. Because we just do not think that is what consumers want or where the community is going. We think of ourselves comparing ourselves more both online and in-store to retailers such as Apple and others, and looking at the way they engage, provide help and guidance and advice, and deepening and have that greater connection with their customers. If I look at a couple of banks that I think doing that really well overseas, who we continue to look at, one is Umpqua Bank out of Oregon, based in Oregon initially and in the US, who's really trying to be a very community-based bank, trying to design their stores differently for the different communities that they have, and using a lot of integration around digital and in-store services to know their customers better. Another example is Danske Bank, initially out of Denmark and now expanding more broadly across Northern Europe. They again are doing some amazing things, and some of the things that we've are trialling in our store down at Docklands, and have been trialling in various stores for a while, Danske is doing as well, in terms of trying to get that connection between digital, online, self-service, and really high value-added conversations with customers in that moment, creating the noise. And so really embracing a lot of the retail sciences that we can learn from an Apple and a whole range of other stores as well. I said, though, technology is really enabling disruption. And if banks and financial institutions don't watch out, at some point they will become less and less relevant if we don't actually listen and look at what our model is doing. If you look at many of the developing countries, mobile is the fastest growing element there. They're not even using online, and they're starting to do more and more transactions between them. If you look at more and more peer-to-peer banking, where there is no intermediary, it's depositors and lenders connecting together on the inside. And Zope is an example of that, based out of the UK. Now, they've been around since about 2005, and in that time, their outstandings now are about £11 billion. Just through people saying, I have money to lend, others saying I need money, agreeing an interest rate or an exchange, which they think is a fair exchange of value, and doing that transaction themselves. And understand their asset quality is as good as any of the mainstream banks. And then if you look at payments, a lot of change happening in payments. Now, I think it's still too early to call where are the winners along the whole value chain. So what is key is actually participating in various components and really experimenting and staying current and looking at where that model is actually going. But one of the interesting innovators over there is a company called Square. And they were founded by one of the original founders of Twitter. And what Square is, it's a simple device which enables peer-to-peer credit card transactions to occur without any need for acquirers in the middle. So you simply insert this device, Square, into your phone. It has like a card reader across the top. And Paul and I could pay Paul via a credit card for whatever services he might have provided, friend to friend. You don't need merchants and so forth involved. So these are all disruptive technologies that we need to embrace as incumbents. Not be afraid of them, but really to embrace them. And our view is that we've done many, many things, but continue to do in terms of positioning ourselves really well for that, but making significant investments around replacing our whole core banking platform, ensuring that we're really innovating in the online, mobile, broader digital space as well. So in closing, before we open up for questions, I think what we've shown is that if you do try to do things authentically in a different way, you can actually fundamentally rebase your business, rebase your reputation in a very, very sustainable way and deliver great returns for shareholders. So we think we've actually taken a leadership role in the industry, but I don't think leadership is enough. And about a year or so ago, I was reading an article by a management thinker, author called Umar Haq in the HBR in December 2009. And it was all about a proposition called the Builder's Manifesto. And his premise and proposition was that the leadership in governments, countries, businesses, etc. was not sufficient to deal with the challenges we face now in the 21st century. And in fact, potentially leadership as a notion is a 19th and 20th century notion really, and built for 20th century economics. And so his proposal was that really to solve and evolve and move going forward, you needed to have really a builder's mindset. Because builders are about not the individual, be it a person or an institution, builders are about a collective. And he calls some distinctions. If you think of a boss, a leader or a builder, a boss says I, a leader says we, a builder says all parts of the community. A boss says, get it done on time. A leader says, get it done ahead of time. And a builder says, just make sure what you do matters. And finally, a boss knows how. A leader shows how. A builder shows why. Australians are calling out for a very different model in terms of banking, one that is more sustainable, one that recognises and works with them. And if we don't, as a whole industry, actually move towards that and embrace that and do things differently, they will actually do it without us, because there's enough disruptive capability to start to really make that journey going forward. So our challenge is we would really challenge the other banks to actually be part of the building, be part of working together around that. Because if we don't, then the whole industry, has the chance to actually become irrelevant at some stage, unless we start to actually build a different model that's more sustainable going forward into the future.